afternoons. And I was kind of happy because I go in the morning for my steps class, so I always was running after my steps class to begin the class of canon law, and then today was like, oh, I can go home and change, and I don't have to. Anyway. Now let's take a brief look on the historical part of the code. But I just wanted to show you some names, just for you to see the name, but we're not going to say much. So if we look into the historical development of the Code of Canon Law, we have to go back in history to find the different sources of the Code of Canon Law, which we found it in legislative text and collection of norms from the East and the West up to the time of Gratian, which is among that collected all the laws of that time, and then he kind of put together the first Code of Canon Law. So the following is a brief chronological summary of the major highlights in the development of the church's legal system. So, so we begin with this. So this is what we have. I would say. So this is the. Those are the main. So the Didache is a collection of instructions originated in Syria or Palestine, pertaining primarily to liturgy and morality. It became the basis for many later collections of laws for the early church. It contains rules about baptism, Eucharist, the organization of the Christian community, and the selection of consecration of church officials. So now after that, we have in the year 2018, we have the Traditio Apostolica of Hippolytus of Rome. It's a Greek text. It's a basic compendium of the liturgical issue of the church in Rome. It contains rules concerning the consecration of bishops, deacons, priests, as well as regulation for confessors, catechumens, lectors, and other diverse prescriptions concerning life in the community of believers. In the year 2050, we have the Discalia Apostolorum. From either Syria or Palestine, one of the first attempts to assemble a body of canon law, touching on many important aspects of the community, the life of the community, including advice for widows and married couples, fasting, and manners of celebrating the Eucharist. Then we have the Canons Ecclesiastici Apostolorum. It's a collection of 30 chapters written in Greek, dealing with both moral norms and disciplinary regulations. And for the effect of many laws, we have the Council of Nicaea, which is the first ecumenical council gathering of representatives from the entire church, convey for doctrinal and disciplinary consolidation, fixing in place some long-standing practices such as the election of bishops, the structural organization of the diocese, and the readmission of the schismatics into the church. Can you see? So every time we have a development, they try to address different issues that are kind of particular issues from a particular time. But then, so all these norms were kind of dispersed in different documents. So and the councils kind of tried to put it together, but it was not enough. So the development of the law was very much linked into two different aspects. So the first one is the conciliar model of the church, governed by bishops gathering in councils to discuss important issues, to formulate norms. And then we have the decretals or decrees from popes in reference to disciplinary actions and collected in archives at the custody of legal specialists in Rome. So some of those collections are the Syntagma Canonorum, which is a collection of canons from councils of the church assembly at Antioch and completed in the 5th century. Then we have the Liber Decretorum of Dionysius Exiguus, a major collection of canonical collection by a monk who collected 50 apostolic canons, 350 canons from various councils, and 38 decrees of various popes. Then we have the collection 50 of Collection Titulorum, and then we have the collection Hagadriana, or Dionysian Hagadriana, and we have the collection, the Dachariana is a French collection. All are different laws collected on different times. So on the following, I just want you to see at least the names until we get into the most important ones. Then we have others that are always mentioned in history. Hickman, Archbishop of Reims, and we have Bouchard, Bishop of Worms, and then we have Ivo, Archbishop of Chartres, and then we have Gratian, which is this is very important. His work is expressed in this collection called the Concordantia Discordantium Canonum, which is the translation will be a harmony of discordant canons. It's kind of it's in the year 1140, and then it's kind of the first collection of canon law, more like a more formal official code of canon law. So other sources of canon law, then we have the Decretals of Gregory the Ninth. So this was assembled by Raymond de Peñafort and promulgated by Pope Gregory the Ninth, and it became an authentic collection of laws for the entire church. And then we have the Liber Sextus, or the Book 6, that includes decrees from Pope Boniface the Seventh and the Council of Lyons in France. And then we have the Corpus Iuri Canonici in the 1500s, and we have the Council of Trent, and then finally we have the Code of Canon Law of the 1917 by Pope Pius X. I just want to, there are entire books written on history of all this collection. I just wanted you to see the names and to see how the canons were just developed for one collection after the other until somebody started putting it together. However, the Code of Canon Law of 1917, even though it's a formal book like any of those you have seen that I brought with me, some people call it like an storage room. I don't know if you have in your houses something like that. If you have this little room and you have furniture you don't want to see, you have books, you have lampstands, you send it all there. I don't know how you call it in English, the storage room. In Spanish we call it the room of San Alejo. Anyway, so whatever you don't want to see is there. So some people said that the Code of Canon Law of 1917, it was like that. All these laws that the church doesn't want to see, it was there, and they were all in not particular order. It was one about bishop, the next one about the lay people, the next one about the sacraments, and the next one about penal law, and it was all combined there, and that was the Book of Canon Law. So can you imagine, it was very difficult to research something like that. Then that's why our Code of Canon Law of 1983 came organized in all these, all these different books and parts, and it's divided the different topics. Sometimes you hear regarding the Code of Canon Law. Sometimes you hear people saying the Code of Canon Law 1983. Sometimes people say the Code of Canon Law 1984. Why is that? Because the code was promulgated in 1983, but then it had 1 year of vacancy. That means before the church could use it, we needed to study it. So the Pope gave the church 1 year to study the new Code of Canon Law. So it became effective a year later in 1984. So what happened in that year where the law has that vacation? It didn't mean that there were no laws. No, the laws of the Code of 17 applied until the new code was effective. But the code was promulgated in 1983 and had 1 year of vacancy. So that means we had 1 year to study the code before it became the law of the church. So what is the purpose of our canonical legislation? So then we come into the issue we just discussed a few minutes ago. So Canon 1752 says, always observing canonical equity and keeping in mind the salvation of soul, which is in the church the supreme law. The Code of Canon Law provides the legal direction for every type of person, organization, and procedure in the church. The Church of Divine Inspiration also needs regulations to provide for the human, material, and spiritual needs for its members. What I have said in short, I will explain it with more words. What is canon law and why it is important? So, as you know, every organization, whether secular or religious, requires its own laws and customs with the purpose of maintaining order. Within the Catholic Church, the internal legal system that governs day-to-day working is known as canon law. As we have seen since the closing of the Second Vatican Council, Catholic laity have increasingly become aware of the size of canon law, whether because of the rise in the annulments or because of the crisis over sexual misconduct among the clergy. Coming across reference to canon law is not longer uncommonly for most Catholic laity. So that's one of the reasons why canon law is important. That means that if we observe canon law, we don't have to observe civil law. So that's another thing. Every rule of canon law has to be concordant with civil law. And then we come into very particular things that you see in the parish. If we have a cleric or a lay person that has committed a crime against a minor, then the church can come and do what they have to do. They remove the person. However, the church has to follow civil laws. In those particular cases, they have to be reported to the particular office assigned by the county for those particular crimes. So a cleric that committed a crime of abuse of a minor, of let's say a catechist, a lay catechist that committed the crime of abuse of a minor, has to be reported to the civil law. So this is not a matter of canon law. The next question is, why does the church have a code of canon law? We need only think on the Ten Commandments as an example of how God has given law to His people. The new covenant of Christ gave birth to a new set of laws for the Christian community. The church eventually used aspects of the legal system of the Roman Empire to enforce these laws. The church in turn was the principal means of stability for Europe through the Dark Ages. Law kept the church focused on its mission to evangelize the nations and provide an environment in which the church was more receptive to God's plan. The Code of Canon Law provides an orderly presentation of law. Canons are individual paragraphs or set of law that the church interprets and applies to given situations. Through the Roman Catholic Church, though the Roman Catholic Church has had collections of laws for many centuries, the Code of Canon Law was issued first in 1917, was revised in 1983, and will more likely to be revised in the future as the church faces new challenges. The Eastern Catholic churches have their own code of law, which was issued in 1990. The church does not need a Code of Canon Law but it has chosen to use an structure. Canon law deals with the day-to-day affairs of the Catholic Church. So if you read canon number 1, that is the first canon. So it says that this code is promulgated only for the.
As Canon 1 says, the canons of this code affect only the Latin Church.
The Latin Church, exactly. So the Eastern churches have their own canon. It looks similar than this one, and it was promulgated in 1990. It was promulgated 7 years after ours, because they took longer because they have to cover less people but more rights. We only use the Latin rite, but they have 5 so we will see it in a minute. So they have to. So it was for them. It's much more difficult to agree in certain issues. From a different perspective, let me approach this question in reference to the necessity of canon law. So we must continue with the presumption that the law is a good thing for any society. Particular groups or organizations need regulations and laws. John Paul II, when promulgated the Code of Canon Law in 1983, described its purpose with the following words. The purpose of the Code of Canon Law is not to substitute faith, grace, charisms, and especially charity in the life of the Church or of the Christian faithful. On the contrary, the purpose of the Code of Canon Law is to create an order in the ecclesiastical society as well as in the life of the individual who belong to it. Alright, so let's advance a little bit because we are running out of time. So. I'm going to skip this part. What already have. Then it's going to. So now we are going to study the internal structure of the Code of Canon Law. So when in the church we talk about publishing a book. So in the civil war, I would say this book was published, this day. But in the church, we say this document is promulgated. That's the official promulgated. We don't say because a publication is more like a civil publication, but promulgated is more like a announced to the faithful because it's a matter of faith of a matter of our religious obedience. So when the code was promulgated, there was this apostolic constitution used to promulgate the code, and you have it in front of it is the first part of the code, and the name of that constitution is Sacra Disciplina Legis, which is the document used by Pope John Paul II to promulgate. That is the official publication of the current Code of Canon Law in 1983. Then, the main body of laws in the Code of Canon Law is divided in 7 books. So we are going to refer those books, and then we have like an addition of other publications, 3 or 4 different documents that were promulgated with the Code of Canon Law for particular areas of ministry. So let me refer each one of those parts of the code. So we now know that the Code of Canon Law is divided in seven books. So the first one. So book number 1 is the general norms. So today we're supposed to cover book number 1, but we just has covered a little introduction. So the general law laid down the ground rules of the church's legal system. In other words, this book contains the building blocks for the whole canonical system. This book reflects all of the basic concepts about canon law. It begins by saying that this codification is only for the Latin Church and that the North or the Eastern churches are in a separate code. We just read that particular canon. This part describes the differences between decrees, precepts, universal and particular laws, privilege, administrative acts, dispensations, among other acts, other juridical acts. The canons of this book also define the terms persons, instruments, and powers which are employed in the rest of the code and outside as well. Most of these concepts have their origin in the long-standing canonical tradition and in Roman law. So we will see some of those generic terms. So this book basically gives you kind of basic concepts to use it throughout the entire code. Tells you what is a decree, how to do it, who can promulgate a decree, how to run an election, how to elect an official, give you all the generic norms that are used throughout the entire code. Then, so we can say that this first book is very technical and legal in nature. Then we have the second book, which is the People of God, and this particular book is very theological because then we will have all the content from the Second Vatican Council. So this book looks at who makes up the church. This book explains how the church, the body of Christ, is divided, indicating the rights and duties of every particular person in the church, and the different subdivisions inside of every particular church, which is in every diocese. So when we talk about a particular church, we are talking about a diocese or an archdiocese. This book clearly establishes the link between the faithful, the clerics and religious, under the direction of the Supreme Pontiff. This book also gives norms for different type of groups in the church, named as Institute of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life. This book is probably the central, largest, and most important part of the code. It reveals the constitution of the church, members, hierarchy, and institutions. So next time when we meet, we are going to just to dedicate the entire time to study this book, The People of God, and we are going to see all the rights and duties of the Christian faithful and the clerics, and we are going to see how it is laid down in the code and how that is reflected in the Second Vatican Council, how those norms of the Second Vatican Council came into the Code of Canon Law as laws. Now the third book is about the teaching office of the church. And in law, this is referred as Ecclesia Munere Docendi. So this book tells us how to proclaim the gospel of Christ through teaching. This book describes the ministry of the word entrusted to the church through the following areas: preaching, catechetical formation, missionary activities, Catholic schools, and means of communications and books. This book also includes the description of various persons responsible for preaching, for catechesis, for missionary action, and Catholic schools. Now, book number 4 is about the sacraments. So you know that the main way that the church uses to develop the mission of sanctifying is through the sacraments. So this is number 4, the sanctifying office of the church, the Ecclesia Munere Sanctificandi. So deals with our sanctification by Christ in the sacraments. 3 different areas of legislation are described in this book: the sacraments, other acts of divine worship, and sacred places and times. This is the second largest and most important book of the code because it contains the canonical discipline of the sacraments and other acts of divine worship, as well as laws for churches, altars, cemeteries, and days of feast and fast. So we will study that book as well. Now we have another book. I think what was it?
It was on the previous.
So the temporal goods is book number 5. The temporal goods. So this book deals with all the material possessions of the church. So gives guidance on how to deal with material goods. This book can be described as the financial handbook of the church. It legislates in matters of acquisition and administration of goods, lands, buildings, contract dispositions, disposition of donations, and alienation. And the book number 6 are kind of the penal law of the church, and it's called The Sanctions in the Church, present the criminal code for the church, the different type of crimes and offenses committed by the faithful, and the proper sanctions and punishment applies to each crime. So through this canon, the church presents its penal law. So you will see how that. But it's basically a penal law, and it's pretty much applied in the church for the dealings of clerics. When I went to school, I never thought I was going to do any of this. It was kind of unreal to me. But then, as I have been practicing canon law for almost 25 years, I cannot believe how much time I have to sit down and write a case for a cleric, that has committed a crime, or I have to sit down and put together a case of a cleric that wants to be dismissed from the clerical estate, or I want to write an argument for a group of nuns that are complaining about something, against a superior. It's all kind of things. So it's things you probably will not see every day, but it's a lot of wisdom. Now the final book are the book of procedures. So this book explains all the legal procedures in the church. This book is the procedural law of the church, describing the different types of procedures, the places and the people commanded to do it. Basically, this book describes the procedure for declaration of invalidity of marriages and penal trials in the church. Several judicial procedures are described in this book. The main one is an oral contentious process for the declaration of invalidity of marriage and the removal and transfer of pastors and the administrative resources. Now, there are certain parts of ministry that has to be covered by particular legislations. So, when the code was promulgated, four different documents were promulgated with the Code of Canon Law. So this part of the code refers to a series of documents promulgated by Pope John Paul II as complementary of our canonical legislation, and four of them deserve to be mentioned at the moment. So the first one is the Apostolic Constitution Divinus Perfectionem Magister, about the procedures for the causes of the saints, so the procedure of canonization. So that is regulated through that particular book, and the ones basically apply this constitution are the Congregation for the Sanctification, the Canonization of Saints. Now we have the Apostolic Constitution Spirituali Militum Curae, which is about the ministry with the military. So they have to be, we have to deal with them in a different chapter. So we have this particular legislation that covers it. And then we have the Apostolic Constitution Pastor Bonus, which is about the reform of the Roman Curia. That was about the organization of the offices in Rome. So the Pope needs to have this in order to be able to do all the reform in all the offices there. And now, finally, the Apostolic Constitution Universi Dominici Regis, which is about the election of the Pope. So the Pope was elected, Pope John Paul II was elected, and when he was elected, he mentioned to the media that the election of the Pope has a few technicalities that needed to be corrected. And he was the one who corrected this one. So one of them was the famous smoke through the chimney, you know, and
The white smoke.
the white smoke, you know. Sometimes now science have developed much more, and when you want white smoke, then they can produce white smoke, and if you wanted the dark, then they can produce the dark. But sometimes it was difficult to distinguish. It is white enough, it is dark enough, had they elected the Pope or not. So one was some of the technicalities he wanted to correct. So one of the things that I will introduce in this constitution was that at the same time that the smoke is coming through the chimney, then the bells ring continually. So that sends a clear message to the people that the Pope, in fact, has been elected.
So it has to be smoke and bells, not
now,
just smoke.
Now it's smoke and bells. And then between the smoke and the bells, people have about hour and a half, 2 hours to come to the plaza in Rome to see when the Pope is coming. So it's when you hear that the news and you go and see in front of the television and you wait half an hour, 45 minutes, and you see the piazza full of people, and you hear the bells continually ringing, and the smoke comes. Anyway, that was one of the technicalities, but he also addressed all the issues of the how the cardinal have to approach and carry the votes. They have to carry with the right hand, visible. It has all these norms there, which is kind of, if you want to read it for curiosity, I ask you to read it. It's kind of fun, so just to see how our church operates. Now, I bought this watch because I wanted a black watch, because I thought it goes well when we have to go in black, and then I cannot read it. And I cannot read what time is it. So anyway, but we still have 10 minutes. Isn't that funny? So, the Code of Canon Law shows two different areas of action of the Church. The lex operandi, which is the law of functions, and the law orandi, the law of prayer. The first one refers to the ministry of law exercised by the Church through its ministries and the observance of the proper laws for order and the proper function. The second explains the need of every member of the Church to find in the Lord the substance and the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. The Second Vatican Council assumed the challenge of the evangelization in the modern world as is described in the Gospels. Go and proclaim the good news to all the world. Your light must shine before men so that they may see your goodness in your acts and give praise to your heavenly Father. So the Code of Canon Law, or Codex Juris Canonici by its proper Latin title, was used it's used for the Latin Church, the Roman Catholic Church, therefore applies to all Catholics. They are, I wanted to show this one to you. So this is how you are going to see if we are going to refer the Code of Canon Law, then sometimes you don't see the whole title. You see CIC, which is Codex Juris Canonici. But if they refer the Code of Canon Law of the Eastern Churches is CCEO, which means Codex Canonorum Ecclesiastical Orientalium. So most of the time you see those two abbreviations. And sometimes it's more specific. You see CIC 84 or you see CIC 17, which means if they are making a reference to the previous code, the Code of 1917. So, but you will see that abbreviation many times.
Father, is that supposed to say Easter or Eastern?
The title.
Oh, I just was one letter missing. Easter. Easter. Now, I want to go with there are a number of Catholics in the world who are not Catholics. There are a number of Catholics in the world who are non-Catholic. The Latin Catholic Church developed in Rome, Western Europe, and the Americas, but the Catholic Church also exists in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and other parts of the world, and that is commonly called the Eastern Catholic Churches, which came from different places: Antioch, East Syria, West Syria, Alexandria, and Cappadocia, and developed different rites, such as the Maronite, Chaldean, Coptic, Ukrainian, the Armenian, to mention some. In the same way that Latin Catholics are unique, there are 21 distinct Eastern Catholic churches. These 21 Catholic churches were given their own Code of Canon Law in 1990, and the Latin Church, and that code doesn't apply to the Latin Church. So I want you to see the names of the yes. I think it might be on the other side. So, but we will see. I want you to see the name of those. But the rights that I wanted to mention to you were. So we have the Byzantine Rite, and we have the Armenian, the Ukrainian, but it's so many names. But I want you to see that one. Probably can begin next time with that particular. So so the Code of Canon Law impose also obligations to non-Catholics. So whether by divine law or by other sources of obligation. For instance, a Protestant person who was divorced will need a declaration of nullity for his or his first marriage from the Catholic Church in order to marry a Catholic, because the Catholic Church believes her teaching concerning the indissolubility of marriage to be a part of God's natural law. Therefore, this teaching binds all people regardless whether or not they are Catholic. The Church cannot permit a Catholic to marry someone who is bound by a previous marriage. So, and you will find this case in RCIA very often. If somebody wants to become Catholic and wants to marry in the church, but then this person is already civilly married to somebody else, but that person has been married before, and that person is not intended to become a Catholic. So in order to regularize that situation, the Code of Canon Law imposed an obligation on the non-Catholic that previous marriage has to be resolved. And in some cases, the person is able to cooperate, but in some cases they say, no, my husband wants to be Catholic, I don't want to be part of it. So then when you have that problem, that person needs to be instructed that that situation has to be regularized on both sides, on both parts. Otherwise, the Catholic part will not be able to function and receive the sacraments in the church because it will be in an irregular marriage. So to conclude, I want to say that this ministry of law has been supported by the popes of the church throughout the years. Beginning with Pope John the 23rd, and then Paul VI and John Paul II. The church asked us to receive these laws as a part of the order that we have to live in the church. Some of the laws come from our doctrine. However, some other laws are ecclesiastical laws that can change in the future, can be adapted in many different ways. In closing, now I bring the words of the Holy Scripture used by John Paul II in his allocution to the Rota, insisting on the role of the church, and using the words of the Holy Scripture through the letter of Paul to the Romans. In Jesus Christ, the life-giving law of the Spirit has set you free from the law of sin and death. All right, so we just leave it here. Now, I want you to, I'm going to give you a few documents here. So the first one is kind of this one is the Code of Canon Law. 25 years later, it was written. A few years ago, but it still has some good issues that I would like you to read. And then the other document contains the structure of canon law and some of the regulations on the sacraments for our next class as well. And then this one, the burden of proof, will be for the last class. So if you work on those documents during this week, so. Now there is also a book that is so each one of you is going to have this book. You don't have to read it for the next class. Don't worry about it.
Because these ones are for the next class, right?
Yes. Not the last document. No, you have more time. The burden of proof that's more for the last class. So Deacon is going to give you this book, which is going to be an instrument for you for many areas of ministry. So just keep it as something very valuable, because it's just the entire Code of Canon Law through commentaries in the most practical parts. So this, I think, is Dinora is coming in a few minutes. Then if you want, sometimes you find all these words, and think that you need a quick reference. This is not a really good book, but sometimes just give you a way to access some information quickly. Like if you don't know, you don't remember what is a rescript, what is a precept, what is a privilege, and then you just go and just read, just one paragraph. So that kind of give you some idea. So if you are looking for something like a dictionary canon law, this one is good. And then for the other parts of the other classes, I will show you other publications on norms. We are ready, Deacon, so they are ready for the book.
You're ready for the book, huh?
Yeah.
You prepped them, huh?
All right, then, okay.
One each. These were extremely challenging to get, as they are no longer the one that was previously produced, was produced by the Franciscans, and they're no longer producing any of those books. The press is down, basically, at least the one that is producing books. And so Virginia ended up calling a place that that was referenced in another source, and it happened to be in Montreal. And when she called, she couldn't speak any French, so they hung up on her. Twice they did that, and then when Laura started, she called basically, and somehow ended up with an English-speaking person, and ordered the books, and here they are. And they were first priced at. They were pricing them at $195, $167.
No.
Yeah, we didn't pay that much. But the nice thing about this book is on the back of it, you have basically a real brief summary of what they added in the book from the previous one, which is really nice.
Well, thank you very much for today, and we look forward to meet again.
Do you have anything in there in the way of assignment?
Oh yes, they have an assignment.
Oh, they do?
I gave him like a reading for next.
Okay.
For next.
All right, so they know what it is?
Yes, yes, they have to read one.
You will see Father Silva a couple more times, but it won't be until next fall.
Do we have the practicum this time or not?
Oh, yeah.
Is that the fourth? Is that the fourth one?
That's the third one, yeah.
Is the third one?
Yeah, it's the third one.
Oh, so it's one.
Well, I'll get with you, okay? Find out about the ones.
All right, okay.
Okay, 'cause I want to.
We just hardly covered the introduction today,
Okay.
and a little bit of the first book, a little bit, nothing, so we kind of a little behind.
All right, okay, all right, okay.
What was the assignment, just this first document?
Yes, the first document, basically.
The first of the four or all of them?
The first for the next class,
Okay.
and then the last one is for the last class, the one that this will proceed, which is the burden of proof, and then the other ones are just some of the material we already covered today, so you can have wait for reading it later. So.
Thank you, Father Zelda.
So I guess you guys will sign it. I guess I do. It's on that, on the document you've given them before?
Yes.
In your document, okay. And the materials you gave them.
Oh, but I can detail that for you. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I can. Can I take this and include it in?
Yeah.
All right.
Or you can just email it to me,
All
whatever
right,
you want to
perfect.
do. Okay.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father Silva, very much. After the announcements, the next session is December the 2nd, okay? And that's the session, that's the retreat, okay? So we'll see you all there. It's at St. John the Baptist, as you all know. Registration's at 8 o'clock.
Are we already registered since we paid, or we have to register also?
No, you just go in and, let them know you're there, and that's it, so. But the actual session starts at 8:30, right? And then I think Mass is at 11:30.
So that Mass at 11:30, is that the Saturday morning Mass, or is that the Sunday?
No, that's the Saturday morning Mass.
Saturday morning.
Yeah, he might be doing something special for it, I'm not sure what he's doing. I'm not sure what Mass he's using, so. Okay, because he could be using an Advent Mass or some kind of a retreat Mass, whatever, one of the special retreat Masses. I don't know what he's going to do. The bishop does what he wants to do, basically.
I guess I was asking, does that fulfill the Sunday obligation? It's not that Mass.
No. Okay, the assignment for the next, and the session after that is the 16th, okay? And you have the letters to the bishop, both letters, the petition and the wife's letter, that need to be in by that day. And catechism reading and study and tests to be taken, and the reflection from chapter 2 is due on that day as well. So, Lodge is Tom for the 16th, and midday prayer, Jeffrey, and snacks, Jeremy and Melissa. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. I think you had a crazy day, huh? You learned some new tricks that you're going to be using for a long time, so